Hello, I'm Vaishali Kohli and you're watching NewsX. Now, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met U.S. State Secretary Marco Rubio in Malaysia on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit. He appreciated their discussion on bilateral ties amid the ongoing trade talks between New Delhi and Washington, with External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia on October 27, 2025. They discussed bilateral ties as well as regional and global issues amid ongoing trade negotiations between the two countries. The meeting came in the backdrop of the proposed bilateral trade deal between India and the U.S., which, according to an official, is very near to concluding. 5 rounds of talks have been completed so far for the first phase of the bilateral trade agreement between India and the U.S. On the trade front, India and the United States are making significant progress towards finalizing a new bilateral trade agreement. After several rounds of dialogue, both the nations have reported convergence on core issues, officials confirming that the legal framework is now under review. All right, I have my guest joining me, Ambassador Jaishankar-Gupta, former diplomat. Now, I'd like to go across to you, Ms. Gupta, and I want to ask you the first question. I want to begin by your opening comments on this, please.
Thank you very much, Vaishali ji, for inviting me. First of all, I would like to say that this is a good, decision to have this meeting, because we have now many outstanding issues with the United States. The most important is, of course, the trade deal, which is pending and on which the talks are going on. In this deal, basically, the agricultural products from US is one of the major hurdles, plus what would be the basic rate of duties. That is another, important issue. In addition, the import of oil from Russia remains a very critical factor, because US has been putting pressure on India not to import oil from from Russia, and that will naturally impact the oil pricing in India and the energy costs which the country is paying for different requirements. So that is another issue. The third issue, in my view, should be the relations with Pakistan, because Trump administration is engaging very positively with a state which is engaged in terrorist activities all around, not only against India but against the world. And he is praising time and again Field Marshal of Pakistan. In fact, I heard yesterday in Kuala Lumpur also he mentioned about him. So a person who is engaged in promoting terrorism not only against India but around the world is being engaged and praised by the Trump administration, has to be taken up. So this is another very important issue which I think needs full discussion. In addition, the discussions will be held about Indo-Pacific, how to integrate the Quad system, whether President Donald Trump would be visiting India for the next Quad meeting, or whether he would like to skip, who will represent him. That is another issue, and how we strengthen Quad, that is very, very important. So these are some of the important issues which are pending, in addition to some collaborations in the technology side, which have been signed and agreed to, but which have not really picked up very well. So these are the major issues which I'm sure S. Jaishankar would have raised with Marco Rubio in the meeting yesterday evening.
Ambassador Gupta, now I have to ask you that, meanwhile, Commerce Industry Minister Piyush Goyal has also said that, they're not going to sign any trade deals with the US or the European Union in a hurry or a rush. So what do you have to say for that?
I think that statement should not be read literally. Ultimately, the trade deal depends on the concessions made by the two sides, and it should be in the interest of India, in the national interest of the country. If a deal is arrived at, without any further extension of dates, why not? We should strike the deal and go for it. If the deal is not favorable to us and it requires further negotiation, then of course we have to have time to negotiate that further. So in my view, the time and deadlines are not important. What is important is the nature of the deal. If it serves our national interest, we should be ready to sign it anytime.
And Ambassador Gupta, now I want to ask you a question. Now, President Donald Trump has always criticized India's tariffs, high tariffs, and he's called them brutal. So, how do you see this materializing in the wake of Trump's statements that are constantly coming in?
I think President Trump, he has the habit of picking up one or two tariff lines, like he picked up the tariff line against one particular, motorbike. Maybe he knew the owner of that, producer of that motorbike in U.S. So he picked up that tariff 85% and said India is living what you call Maharaja tariff against U.S. products, which is not true. Maybe there are some products which are considered highly luxurious in terms of Indian requirements, on which we have levied certain high tariff, but that is not universal. Our tariff range is within the WTO norms, and I believe it is more or less in the range of 15 to 20% on most products. There may be some exceptional cases where the product is not required at all in India, and we have levied heavy tariff on that. And he has the habit of picking up that one particular tariff and quoting it all the time, which is not right, which does not reflect the correct reality on the ground.
And Ambassador Gupta, my final question to you is that what do you think should be India's possible trade strategy which would potentially benefit India?
I think it is very clear, first of all, that we cannot allow uncontrolled import of US agricultural products. There are multiple reasons for that. Firstly, many of those products are GMO, which may not be considered good in our country. Secondly, some of those products, if they are allowed at very cheap prices, that will damage our rural economy, particularly the farmers. Like for example, they want to export a lot of soybean, a lot of maize, and a lot of wheat. Those products cannot be allowed because that is directly hitting our farmers in the country, and our farmers are not in a position to compete with the US farmers who are very rich. We are talking about the two scales which are very, very different. Our scale is very, very low, their scale is very, very high, and they have this mechanized agriculture where hardly any manpower is needed, and they produce them in large scale and they are able to export at lower prices. And then the next important point is that the US is highly subsidizing the agricultural sector altogether. So that is going to hit. That is one factor in which we have to be very careful. The other factor is that the overall tariff on the products which are going from India to US, that should be comparatively low. It cannot be more than 19%, which has been allowed by US to many countries in Asia. I think 19% is the base rate as of now. If we can get lower than that, that would be good. If we can't, we should stick to 19%. The third thing is that they would also like us to import some of their other products apart from agriculture products. I think in some cases where we can afford them and we are importing them from elsewhere, we can consider them importing. Like for example, energy needs. They want to export crude oil from US to India, and we should have no problem in accepting it, provided it is at competitive, international prices. Then there are certain other issues which will come up. Those are issues concerning what we call non-tariff barriers. US and other countries, they are very, skilled in putting those non-tariff barriers. They will say that your, products have this kind of ingredients which can harm. Like they recently imposed a curb on the spices from India, saying those spices are going to damage the health of the people. So these kind of curbs are very innocently levied by the US government from time to time. We have to understand their game, and we should not allow the health issues to become a non-tariff barrier in the whole process. This has come up not only here, but I have seen this non-tariff barrier coming up again and again in many countries. For example, Indian mangoes. They say that they cannot allow because there are some problems with those mangoes. While the mangoes which are available in US, which come from Mexico and Brazil and other countries, they are no good at all. In fact, I have seen those mangoes. Their quality is far inferior than those of Indian mangoes. So we have to be careful on non-tariff barriers. I think a proper drafting should be, or proper clause should be included in the draft, in which such barriers, should be discouraged by both sides. I think these are some of the important factors which we have to take into account while negotiating this deal.
Absolutely.